Hi, everybody, and welcome to Down to Earth with Terry Virch, where we talk about what matters down here on planet Earth. I've got a really important episode this week, I think. I'm going to do a monologue and talk about the midterm elections because it's coming up tomorrow when this should drop, the week of Tuesday, November 9th. Here in the United States, we have our midterm elections, and many of you probably already voted by mail or in person and early voting. But the big election day is on Tuesday. And so for those from other countries, our midterm elections are kind of crazy. Every 4 years, we have a presidential. And then in between that, on the 2 years before the next presidential election, we have a midterm for our representatives, for senators, for governors, for secretaries of state, for the orphan judge. All kinds of officials are up for this election. And it's a big one. It's a really big one. We're probably going to have record dollars spent on this campaign. We're going to have record people voting, maybe. In every election, everybody says this is the most important election of our lives. But this one matters a lot, I think, because in some ways, democracy is on the ballot, which is a big deal. In other ways, the economy, immigration, and those kind of things are on the ballot. And those things are really important, and they're big deals, too. There's this massive war going on in Ukraine. China's watching to see how we do, and hoping that American democracy is on the decline. And so the way that we vote as a nation is super important. Congress traditionally swings away from the president's party. I think 18 of the last 20 midterms going back to World War II have gone against the president. So Joe Biden's a Democrat, so Republicans are almost for sure going to pick up seats in the House. They might take over the Senate. Right now, the Senate's 50-50. It might go Republican. We'll have to wait and see. The Senate's really a toss-up. It's probably only going to change by 1 or 2 seats, I would guess, or maybe it'll stay 50-50, who knows. But the House is going to pick up some Republicans. Will it be enough to switch it to a Republican majority? I'm pretty sure it will, but we'll have to wait and see. That's the beauty of democracy. Unlike some of our colleagues in other giant authoritarian countries, you don't have to wait and see. You know what the outcome's going to be. Ours is more interesting. And at the heart, this election 6 months ago was going 1,000% Republican. There was no doubt. And then the President Biden's been pretty unpopular. I think his popularity is about 40%. It's pretty low. And then some interesting things happened. He passed a lot of stuff. The president had a really good first couple months of 2022, 2021. He got a lot of stuff done. Just to go over a few of them, the big thing was the Inflation Reduction Act, which is kind of funnily named, but there's some important stuff in there. Prescription drug costs are capped. There's a lot of money to help the energy industry. There is he got healthcare for veterans done. There's a Chips and Science Act that he got that's really important because right now all of our chips are made in China and Taiwan and overseas, and that's a non-negotiable. We have to have some security there, and the government's putting some really significant money into bringing that production back to the state. So that was a big one. There was a bipartisan gun bill. I just could not believe it. It didn't do much. It was very weak, but at least it did something, and I think it's going to save some lives. It might help with background checks and so on. That was amazing that they got that done. The world pays attention to America now. The American brand was crushed in the last 4 years. Between 2016 and 2020, the world stopped trusting America, and we're kind of back. I don't know how long that's going to last, but that's been something that's been good. He ended the war in Afghanistan. If you like the way it happened or not, you could say back in March of 2020 when Jared Kushner negotiated directly with the Taliban, Afghanistan's fate was sealed. My personal view is continuing that war was just going to continue to waste American dollars and lives, and Afghan lives also. Unfortunately, the men of Afghanistan dropped their weapons and didn't even fight at all. And that's causing terrible things for the women of Afghanistan. But after 20 years, if they couldn't get their act together after us helping them for 20 years, it was never going to happen. I think it was the right thing to end that war. And so, there's been a lot of success. People talk about the economy. The economy is terrible. Well, the economy has grown incredibly in the last year or two. It has really recovered. It had begun to recover in 2020, and in 2021, that recovery just continued in amazing ways. We basically have historically low unemployment. It's something called full employment, where everybody's employed that could be employed. There's always going to be a few percent of people not working, but if you want a job, you can get a job. We all know this. You go to anywhere and they're hiring. I mean, the employment situation right now is great. Wages have increased after a decade or more of stagnant wage growth. Wages have begun to increase. If this is if to hear the Republican commercials that we're all getting inundated with, this is an American carnage. If this is a horrendous economic situation, this is my kind of horrendous economic situation, because things are going pretty well. The big issue is inflation. Inflation got too high. There's a lot of reasons for inflation. I think that some of that was there was too much stimulus over the last couple of years that began in 2020, by the way, and was passed, a lot of it in bipartisan fashion. But I do think the Democrats spent a little bit too much money. I think having a war in Ukraine is horrendous, and that caused energy prices to spike this past winter. The good news is they've been coming down now for several months, and a price of a barrel of oil or a gallon of gas is almost exactly right in the average of what it's been since World War II. So I think we're paying what gas should be right now. What it was 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 7 years ago, basically in 2014, oil prices crashed. It was a disaster for the energy industry. I live in Houston. I work part-time for a company that is traditionally oil and gas, and they're doing energy transition stuff now that I'm helping them with. But the last 7 years has been a disaster. The price of oil was way too low. When countries like Saudi strong arm OPEC into cutting back production, and that artificially raises prices. Those are the kinds of things that are causing inflation. This disaster that Putin is causing food prices to go up. The price of metal. One of the businesses I'm working with needs titanium and aluminum and these metal products to manufacture stuff, and that is not good for inflation. So there's lots and lots of reasons for inflation. Many of them are out of the control of the American president, as is a price of gallon of gas. In case Republicans haven't studied energy, the price of a barrel of crude oil is set on global markets, and there are some spreads between West Texas Intermediate and Brent crude and so on, but for the most part, that's a global pricing thing. And the price of oil has come down a lot in the last couple months. There's other reasons for inflation. A lot of companies are just going, we can raise prices now, so let's do it. No one's going to complain. That's happened a lot. I've seen it happen. I've heard executives say that exact thing. Hey guys, now's the time to raise our prices. Let's raise them. I just got my note from Apple that they're raising their monthly subscription by $2. I just got my note from Hulu. They're raising their monthly subscription. A lot of companies are just raising prices because they can. I just saw that the seasonal inflation adjusted CPI was 0.4%, which is about 5% annual inflation. That's a big improvement. It depends on what you're talking about. Housing prices are crushed right now with the Fed spiking interest rates and therefore mortgage rates. Housing prices are going to start coming down. So we're going to see inflation slowly come down. It's too high right now. That's a big thing. But let's talk about the flip side of that. And this is super important, and it's super devastating for me. I was talking to someone I know very well. We were talking about the economy and immigration and all these different issues. And he texted me. He actually said, I would rather have lower inflation than democracy, which just, it's beyond comprehension. But I think lots and lots and lots of people in America are thinking that way. They're happy to kind of look the other way, fudge it. Well, denying an election isn't that big of a deal. I mean, I don't like Biden anyway, so what's wrong with saying he didn't get elected? They're willing to trade that for this alleged inflation improvement or economic improvement or border improvement. So I want to talk about this thing. Kevin McCarthy, our nation's minority leader in the House of Representatives, he's like the top congressman for Republicans, came up with this thing called Commitment to America. He's kind of plagiarizing from Newt Gingrich, his contract from America back in 1994. But what Republicans are saying is if they come into power in the House and the Senate, they're going to do all this stuff. Well, the reality is they're not going to do anything because they don't have a veto-proof majority. So nothing's going to happen if the if the majority switches. But these are the things that they want to do. So let's talk through them and see if they're actually going to make any improvement or not. Because if Republicans were truly much better on all these policy issues, but I'll bite my tongue and hold my nose and vote Democrat, that's a trade that you have to decide. But let's see if it's a false trade. Let's see if what they're selling on the Republican side really is better. They want an economy that's strong. Well, who doesn't want an economy that's strong? They want to fight inflation and lower the cost of living. Well, who doesn't want to do that, right? They want to curb wasteful government spending. Well, who doesn't want to curb wasteful government spending? And you can have less stimulus, and guess what? There's no more stimulus on the pack. We had all of our stimulus. That what is going to change in the future is nothing. They're not going to stop more stimulus because we're not doing any more stimulus. They want to increase take-home pay and create good paying jobs. Well, who doesn't want to do that? They want to make America energy independent and reduce gas prices. Well, like I said, gas prices have been reduced a lot. If they reduce them anymore, it's going to hurt our own oil and gas companies. And America is energy independent. We are a net exporter of crude oil. And there are lots of oil leases to drill, but oil and gas companies aren't drilling it, in part because the Biden EPA is very hostile to energy, and I don't like that. And they need to do better. They really need to do better. I agree with that. Electing Republican congressmen isn't going to change the EPA. That won't change anything. So that's not going to help at all. And a lot of companies are just not putting money. A lot of banks are not putting capital. A lot of organizations are not putting capital or money or resources or anything into fossil fuels. And this isn't going to be fixed by electing a Republican House. It's just tough. Even if you had, a pipeline and leases to drill, there's just not as many companies that want to drill more oil and gas things. And that's just the way it is. Republicans want to strengthen the supply chain and end dependence on China. Ironically, that's exactly what just happened in the Inflation Reduction Act and the CHIPS Act. Not in every possible way. And I agree that this is a big goal for sure. But that's certainly something that Biden's been saying. Again, we're putting all this money into chip production here in the States. I think we should also do it for solar production here in the States. I think we should do it for nuclear, and that is something that Democrats don't promote nearly enough. But in other words, this is something that we're doing, so they're not really going to change that much. They want a nation that's safe, secure the border, and combat illegal immigration. Yes, we need to do that, and that has not been done enough. And one of the biggest problems that we have, and I just talked to some folks who were experts in this, and they deal with border people in South America and Central America, especially in Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras. They know what's happening in the States, and they listen to what our leaders are saying. And what they hear constantly is the border is open. And so between Trump and Kevin McCarthy and Lindsey Graham and all these Republicans who are shouting from the rooftop constantly that the border is open, that's why so many people are coming here. The Republicans are causing, in part, it's not only their fault, but a big part of it is their constant yelling that the border is open. And I think the way to combat that is not by human trafficking and illegally shipping people from Mexico or wherever to Massachusetts. I think that's just immoral and completely reprehensible, and probably illegal. But to say that what they're doing is just not true. Reduce crime and protect public safety. So I just went through some statistics. Crime has been coming down. Since the last 30 years, violent crime is down about 80%. If you look over the last decade, it's down about almost half. It's probably 40% reduced. In 2020, there was a terrible spike. And a big part of that was this movement to shun police. And I agree that was terrible. We need to support police. We need to make sure that policing is a career that people want to go into. And who the heck would want to do that now if you're going to get sent to jail every time you interact with some criminal on the street who behaves badly, and then the policeman is the one that's blamed? We need to back off of that. Democrats want to defund police. Well, no, they don't. Maybe in like Seattle and Portland and some crazy left-wing cities like San Francisco, they're saying stupid stuff like that. But by far, the vast majority are not saying that. Certainly, the federal government doesn't say that. And if you want to support police, don't call to arms all of America to attack the FBI when they go try and get our nation's secrets back from your former guy. That was the worst anti-law enforcement thing that I've ever seen in my life, is this violent reaction towards the FBI. When policemen try to protect the nation's capital from an insurrection that you incited, that you sent all these people there with weapons and that actually killed police officers, don't call them great guys, call them insurrectionists and murderers like they are. That's how you support police, support the FBI, support the Capitol Police when they're defending the nation's capital from you. On January 20th last year, when we had all of the inaugurations everywhere, every state capital had National Guard and police. The police were all out defending all these state capitals from Republicans. They weren't there defending them from Democrats. They were there defending them from Republicans who were threatening violence against the country. So yes, we should support police. I agree. And that needs to start with the Republican Party as much as it does Democratic Party. Defend America's national security. Who doesn't want to do that? The Biden administration has dramatically increased our defense budget. They have stood up to dictatorships. The former guy stood on the stage and held hands with Putin and said, no, I don't believe the CIA. If Putin says that he didn't hack our elections, why would he must be telling the truth. They didn't invite Viktor Orban and promote these authoritarian dictators at their CPAC conference like Republicans are. If you want to support national security, I've voted Republican my whole life. I used to believe in Ronald Reagan's vision for a strong military. Today's party is 100% the opposite of that. Their national security strategy seems to be a disaster to me. This is why the former guy was trying to dismantle NATO. NATO is the most important security organization on the planet. We need a similar organization, in my opinion, in the Pacific. The former guy dismantled the TPP, which was an economic Trans-Pacific Partnership. It was an economic organization, but it was designed to contain China. So if you want strong security, in years gone by, that meant Republican. In 2022, that means very few Republicans are truly strong on security, in my humble opinion. Education. So here's the thing. Make sure every student can succeed and give parents a voice. That's code word for more homeschooling, more charter schools, kind of for dismantling the public education system. I think we need to strengthen the public education system. I don't think that means giving in to unions and promoting everything that teachers unions want, but it does mean strengthening public education and not just dismantling it, which is what a lot of Republican politicians seem to want to do. Achieve longer, healthier lives for Americans is another thing on this commitment to America. One way to do that would be to get your vaccine against COVID. 300,000 Americans died needlessly that would have been saved had they had a COVID shot. Republican governor after Republican governor has promoted vaccine misinformation. Ron DeSantis is the worst. He put one of the worst imaginable. I can't believe this person graduated from medical school in charge of the Florida medical system as a surgeon general. Some Republican governors handled it well and did a good job. And they balance. You don't need to be completely locked down. You don't need to be masking 24/7. Of course not. But there's times if you have a new virus that just comes out, if it's killing thousands or hundreds of thousands of people, it's fine to take some time to protect yourself from this until we get a vaccine. And then once we get a vaccine that's very safe, just like Joe Biden won the election, the vaccine's safe. There's no need to promote disinformation. This irresponsible, and it's a Republican thing. It killed lots of Americans. The party of pro-life literally killed 300,000 Americans, and that's just unconscionable. How about reducing gun violence? You want Americans to achieve healthier, longer lives? Let's not have our kids get mowed down in schools. My governor here in Texas is making sure that 18-year-olds can buy AR-15s. By the way, they can buy them with no background check because they protect this private sale and gun show sale. It's just immoral. And that's the party of pro-life, promoting 45,000 gun deaths a year. A couple other real quick things here. A government that's accountable, preserve constitutional freedoms. That's code word for I want my gun and there's nothing you're going to do to take the gun away. Protect the lives of unborn children. I'm for that. I have pro-life leanings, but I also understand that women should have rights to their own body. And I believe that there should be a phased-in approach to early in a pregnancy. Abortion's legal. The longer you get in the pregnancy, there's less and less abortion. And late in the pregnancy, it's almost impossible to get an abortion unless it's mother's life or a case like that. So I don't have the specific answer, but I do believe in balancing a woman's rights with an unborn baby's rights. And I think almost every country in Europe has the same thing. Abortion's legal early in the pregnancy, and the later you get, it's harder to get an abortion. A lot of the Republicans are going hardcore, no exception for life or for the mother's life, no exceptions for rape and incest. A friend of mine's a Republican lawmaker in a state, and when he voted for that hardcore total ban, and then he realized what that really meant and the horrendous implications of that, he kind of he's like, hey guys, we need to rethink this. We really can't be that hardcore. And he just got hammered by the Republican Party. So Republicans in some states like Maryland, Larry Hogan, they're going to have reasonable access to abortion. In many states, they're going to shut it off completely. Keep that in mind. Hold Washington accountable, they want to do. How about if the president tries to hang on to power after he loses an election and he tries to overthrow the government, basically, how about you hold him to account? Almost 100% of Republicans did not want to do that with the former guy. I think hold Washington accountable is good when they do something wrong, which is exactly what the Republican Party doesn't want to do. Restore the people's voice is what they're talking about, voting. What that really means is suppress voter rights. Now, there's some things I can understand, voter ID. Update your voter registration rolls every year, whatever. I can understand basic stuff like that, but they're implementing in states like Georgia and other places. They're implementing in Texas. Texas is the worst. Blatantly racist policies designed to make it more difficult, especially in inner cities where there's Black and Hispanic communities, make it harder for them to vote. It's just going back to 1968. It's disgusting, and I can't believe people are voting for it. I get basic election integrity needs to be there. I get that. And it has been there in every single 100% of independent academic studies and whatever election organizations. They've all said that our last election was the most secure ever. Republicans are trying to fix a problem that doesn't exist, and that's really angering to me, because the best part about democracy is making sure as many people can vote as or should be allowed to vote, and that's just not happening now. The only real true legit election fraud muling ballots was a Republican in North Carolina who got busted. I think he's in jail now. It just happened a couple years ago. Literally, a Republican congressman was sending people around and just making fake ballots. It was awful. That's the only one. That's the only episode I know. I think Mark Meadows registered to vote in a place where he doesn't live, that was against the federal rules and the state rules. And so he probably committed a felony for election fraud. But again, he's a Republican. And it was one vote out of 100 million votes. So when you're making your decision for voting this week, I had a couple litmus tests. If people are denying the election, that's an absolute no-go for me. And if people are endorsed by the former guy, if there's a Trump endorsement on a name, it's a guarantee that that's not a good human being. That's someone that should not be in any elected office. That's my own personal litmus test. I want the economy to get better. A lot of times I'll see policies that Democrats have that frustrate me, and I wish they were different. But when I see a lot of the things that Republicans are doing, they're undermining our country, and I just cannot abide by that. So I hope people take that into account. And the bottom line is, we need candidates that you don't have to hold your nose for. It's time for America to have candidates that you're not holding your nose, that you're like, yeah, I like this guy. The lesser of two evils is just unacceptable. And we need to get to a point where we have people that have good, solid policies, but are not insurrectionists or authoritarians in sheep's clothing. So anyway, that's my take on the election. Thanks for listening to me rant and rave about politics. I love talking about space, and I got some cool space episodes coming out. But unless we get the political science right, the rocket science is not going to matter, because we're in a dangerous time in life, and we need to get this stuff right. So that's why I'm talking about this. If you love Down to Earth with Terry Virch, please give me a rating, subscribe, tell your friends about it, and I will see you next week. Bye-bye.